The first breath Anna drew at the stone serpent quarry tasted of finality, a bitter communion wafer of rock dust, fine and gray, coating the inside of her mouth. It mingled with the stale, acrid tang of unwashed sweat, rising like a noxious fume from the pit below, and a faint, disturbing metallic undertone. The ghost of old blood baked relentlessly by the uncaring sun. It clung to her tongue, rasped in her throat, a constant, gritty sermon preaching defeat. My fault. The dust seemed to whisper with every inhale. I drove us onto that path. I believed his damned lies. She remembered the smooth reassurances, the dismissal of her father's cautious map notations about treacherous side trails. Beside her, Mary coughed, a small, frail sound almost immediately swallowed by the vast emptiness. Her slight frame trembled almost imperceptibly beneath the thin shawl, a tremor Anna felt more than saw. "Anna," she whispered, voice ragged and tight, barely audible above the wind whipping dust devils around their worn boots. "It's so big and ugly, like a wound that won't stop bleeding gray." Anna pulled her sister closer, her arm instinctively tightening. "I know, Mary. Just stay close to me. Don't look down too much." They stood on the precipice of the vast, ugly gash scarring the earth, a brutal wound inflicted upon the land that mirrored the fresh, bleeding wounds in their own hearts. The late afternoon sun, beginning its slow, indifferent descent, stretched long, distorted shadows across the quarry floor, making the place look even more menacing, like the skeletal maw of some long-dead, malevolent beast waiting patiently to devour them whole. Far below, figures moved with the agonized slowness of insects trapped in amber, men, stooped and grimy, their faces obscured by distance and dust. The rhythmic, desolate chink-chink of their hammers against the unyielding stone echoing upwards, a monotonous, soul-crushing dirge for lost hope and broken bodies. Their westward journey, conceived in the raw, bewildering fog of grief following their parents' sudden illness, and nurtured by the fragile seedling of hope for reunion with a distant, barely remembered uncle, had shattered here, abruptly and with calculated, chilling cruelty. The sturdy wagon, laden with the last precious remnants of a life that already felt impossibly distant, a life filled with the heady scent of sunshine on blooming honeysuckle vines climbing the porch, the comforting aroma of baking bread drifting from their mother's warm kitchen, their father's quiet, steady presence by the hearth, their mother's gentle hands smoothing their hair, hadn't simply broken down through misfortune. It had been deliberately diverted, subtly steered off the main track onto a less traveled, rougher path by a smiling man whose eyes didn't match his reassuring words. Silas Croft's men, emerging silently from the roadside scrub like patient predators who knew their prey was already weakened, were nothing like the boisterous, shouting bandits of fireside tales. They were quiet, methodical, their eyes cold and assessing, devoid of any spark of human warmth, sizing up the orphan sisters not as bereaved children deserving of pity or aid, but as potential assets, quantifiable units of labor to be cataloged and exploited. Vague, honeyed promises of shelter and decent work near their uncle's supposed settlement, offered with practiced, almost casual ease, dissolved like morning mist under the harsh, unblinking glare of reality. The reality was this isolated, God-forsaken pit, miles from any known route, any potential help. Their names, Anna and Mary Sutter, were inscribed with scratchy finality into a grimy, oversized ledger by a hollow-eyed clerk whose ink-stained fingers moved with chilling indifference, as if recording bales of cotton or sacks of grain. Anna watched, numb, as he barely glanced at them. Debts were immediately assigned, exorbitant, utterly fictitious sums for transport, lodging, provisions, even a ludicrous charge for guidance, invisible shackles forged from cynical lies, instantly binding them to this place with crushing weight. Their few precious belongings, carefully packed treasures meant to anchor them to their past and provide comfort in the unknown future. Their mother's worn leather-bound Bible with its pressed Columbine bookmark. Their father's spare spectacles held together with wire. A small tin of essential sewing needles. The locket containing miniature portraits of their parents vanished into the insatiable maw of Croft's enterprise. Confiscated as partial settlement of their fabricated debt, handled as if they were junk. Even Bess, their sturdy, gentle pony, the last living link to their farm, whose soft muzzle Mary had tearfully kissed goodbye only that morning, was led away impassively by one of Croft's men. Another asset appraised and liquidated without ceremony. In the space of less than an hour, they were rendered penniless, stripped bare, utterly alone, and irrevocably trapped. Anna felt a cold, physical dread seep into her bones, heavier and more chilling than the gray dust settling relentlessly on her shoulders. She had been the one driving the wagon when they were subtly diverted. She had held the reins. She had believed the lies. The weight of that responsibility felt crushing, suffocating. A stone heavier than any they would be forced to haul. Jedediah Grimes, the quarry overseer, materialized from the swirling dust near the pit's edge, like an ill omen spit forth by the ravaged earth itself. He was built like the rock he lorded over, thick-set, solid, seemingly carved from the same unforgiving gray stone. His face was a harsh landscape of deep-etched lines, weathered by relentless sun and an ingrained cynicism that seemed to poison the very air around him. His eyes, small and dark like embedded pebbles, missed nothing and offered absolutely no warmth. No flicker of human connection, only cold calculation. He surveyed the sisters with a look that stripped away their youth, their gender, their grief, their very humanity, leaving only their perceived potential for relentless, back-breaking work. "So, these are the new ones," he grunted, his voice the grating sound of stones grinding together. He spat a thick stream of brown tobacco juice, the gob landing unsettlingly close to the worn toe of Anna's boot. She flinched inwardly but held her ground, meeting his dead gaze for a fraction of a second before looking down, remembering the harsh lessons of obedience already learned through stories, though never experienced until now. Don't look like much. Scrawny things. City soft. Likely. He surveyed Mary's slight frame with particular disdain. We'll see if they earn their keep, or if the dust takes them first. Doesn't matter much either way to Croft. He made a vague, dismissive gesture with his thumb towards the sprawling, squalid structure perched precariously on the quarry rim like a fungal growth. Bunkhouses over there. Find a spot. If you can squeeze in. Grubs at sundown. Work starts at first light. Don't be late. I don't tolerate lateness. He didn't wait for, nor expect, a response. Turning his broad, imposing back, he strode away towards the lower levels, his heavy boots crunching with undisputed authority on the loose rock and debris, leaving them enveloped in a fresh swirl of choking dust and fear. The bunkhouse was a circle of hell Dante hadn't conceived, lacking even the structure of damnation. Longer and lower than it first appeared, it was crudely cobbled together from rough, unplaned planks, warped boards salvaged from unknown sources, and scavenged pieces of rusted tin, looking as if it might collapse entirely in the next strong wind. It housed perhaps 50 or 60 men, packed tight, and now, incongruously, terrifyingly, them. Stepping inside was like plunging into a physical manifestation of despair. The air was thick, foul, and suffocating, a potent blend of unwashed bodies, stale grease from countless meager, repetitive meals, cheap, acrid tobacco smoke. The lingering stench of sickness, a persistent cough, echoed Mary's own developing rasp, and the almost tangible miasma of hopelessness that clung to everything. Rough bunks. Many merely raised platforms covered with thin, indescribably filthy straw ticking that rustled suspiciously, hinting at unseen inhabitants, lined the walls in double tiers. Men, their faces etched with exhaustion, apathy, or a simmering, impotent resentment that never quite boiled over into open rebellion, barely glanced up as the sisters entered, seeking refuge in their own misery, conserving even the energy required for curiosity. "Oh, Anna," Mary choked out, pressing closer, her hand clutching Anna's arm desperately, her voice tight with visceral fear. "It smells sick in here, like things have died and been left." "Sheesh, we'll find a corner," Anna whispered fiercely back, her eyes scanning the dim, fetid interior, searching desperately. "Away from everything. Keep your head down." They found a sliver of bare, hard-packed earth floor near the back wall, partially hidden behind a stack of discarded, broken-handled tools. Away from the worst of the coughing, snoring, and muttered curses that filled the foul air. There was no privacy, no comfort, only the oppressive, crushing weight of shared human misery in close, unavoidable proximity. Anna felt Mary trembling violently against her side, trying to stifle her developing coughs in the dusty fabric of Anna's sleeve, her eyes wide with sheer paralyzing terror. "What have I let us into? Dear God, what have I done?" Anna screamed silently, the question echoing in the barren space of her own heart. That first meal was a horror, served with brutal efficiency from large, steaming, greasy cauldrons, a ladleful of watery stew, containing dubious, pale fragments of unidentifiable meat and limp, grayish vegetables that tasted faintly of earth and decay, served in dented, rust-stained tin bowls. It was accompanied by a chunk of hard, dark bread that seemed capable of breaking teeth or being used as a weapon. Anna forced herself to swallow mouthful after mouthful, her stomach churning violently, the taste vile, knowing with grim certainty that they needed strength for whatever tomorrow held. "Try, Mary," she urged gently, trying to keep the tremor from her own voice as she watched her sister pick listlessly at the congealing mess. "Just a little. For strength." "I can't, Anna," Mary whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes, making muddy tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "My throat. It feels like swallowing rocks. And the smell." She shuddered. They drank brackish, metallic-tasting water scooped from a communal barrel near the door, tasting the ubiquitous dust that coated everything, inside and out. As they huddled together later on the cold earth floor, trying to find some warmth and shield themselves from the casual awareness of the men around them, a rough-looking man stumbled nearby, reeking of cheap liquor, and leered at them openly, running a grimy hand over his unshaven jaw before shuffling away, muttering something crude. The small incident sent a fresh wave of sickening fear through Anna. We are so terribly alone here, defenseless. Sleep, when it finally claimed them hours later, battered by the surrounding noise and stench, was shallow and fitful, a tense state punctuated by the cacophony of the bunkhouse, guttural snores that vibrated through the floor, hacking coughs that echoed Mary's own fragility with terrifying resonance, muttered curses from men lost in troubled dreams, the occasional choked whimper of pain or despair. Anna lay awake long after Mary drifted into an uneasy slumber, holding her sister close, trying to shield her from the cold seeping relentlessly up from the hard-packed earth floor. She listened to the mournful whistle of the wind through the numerous cracks in the rough plank walls, each gust feeling like a spectral sigh of the countless spirits broken in this place. This can't be real, she thought desperately, clutching the memory of home, the scent of rain on summer dust, Pa's laughter, Ma's humming, like a drowning woman clutches driftwood. It's a nightmare. We'll wake up back home. Ma will be calling us for breakfast. Pa will be whistling by the barn. But the gritty reality of the filthy straw beneath her thin blanket, the persistent dull ache in her heart where grief resided, the cold dread coiling like a serpent in her stomach, relentlessly told her otherwise. Their future, once envisioned with modest hopes of family, reunion, and normalcy, was now measured solely by the endless clang of hammers on stone and the ever-increasing depth of the stone serpent quarry pit. The first light of dawn brought no gentle awakening, no rosy promise. It was a harsh, brutal summons, a loud, insistent, jarring, clanging noise, someone viciously beating a heavy metal pipe against a discarded plowshare near the bunkhouse door, jolted them from their uneasy sleep. Around them, men groaned, cursed with weary familiarity, and began the slow, painful process of stirring. They pulled on ragged, inadequate clothes, their movements stiff and slow from exhaustion, poor nutrition, and the pervasive chill that seemed to settle deep in their bones. Anna gently helped Mary up, their own bodies already protesting with aches from the hard floor and the damp cold. Outside, the air bit sharply, the sky a vast, pale, unforgiving gray. Jedediah Grimes stood near the entrance to the pit, his solid silhouette stark against the growing light. A thick leather strap held loosely, almost casually, in his hand. Its presence was a constant, silent threat, an exclamation point to his authority. "Move it! Move it!" his voice barked, devoid of any human inflection, cracking like a whip over the assembled workers. Sun's burning daylight, and Croft ain't paying you useless layabouts to sleep. Get to the pit. You new ones, Sutter sisters, rubble crew. Their first day was a brutal, soul-crushing initiation into hell. They were assigned to the rubble crew, tasked with hauling away smaller chunks of blasted rock, sharp-edged debris ranging from fist-sized stones to heavier pieces that required all Anna's strength and awkward leverage, from an area where teams of grim-faced men worked with heavy sledgehammers and long iron chisels, breaking down larger boulders freed by the blasting operations. They were given rough, scratchy burlap sacks that quickly grew agonizingly heavy and rubbed their shoulders raw through their thin shifts. The work involved constant, perilous scrambling over uneven, treacherous ground littered with loose scree that shifted unpredictably underfoot, endless bending at the waist, lifting heavy, awkward stones with muscles unused to such specific, relentless strain, carrying the loaded sacks across the uneven terrain with burning thighs and protesting backs, and dumping the rocks onto a growing pile designated by one of Grimes's underlings. The weedy, rat-faced man named Finn, whose eyes darted nervously, missing nothing, especially any perceived slackness or weakness. Anna's muscles, accustomed to the varied demands of farm work but unprepared for this relentless, specific strain, began screaming in protest within the first hour. Her hands, softened by years of mending, cooking, and gardening, quickly developed angry red patches that soon erupted into painful, weeping blisters. She bit down hard on her lip, tasting the metallic tang of blood mingled with dust, ignoring the stinging pain, forcing herself to focus solely on the repetitive motion, bend, lift, carry, dump, find a rhythm, any rhythm, something to make the agonizingly slow minutes crawl towards the eventual end of the day. Her primary focus, however, shifted constantly to Mary. Her heart clenched painfully each time her younger sister stumbled on the loose rocks, paused with a hand pressed tightly to her chest, gasping for breath. Her small face alarmingly pale beneath the inevitable coating of gray dust. Finn, the sub-foreman, offered no respite, only sharp-tongued, whining exhortations to work faster, delivered from a safe distance, well clear of any actual labor himself, his voice thin and grating. "Come on, girls, put your backs into it. Think Croft's running a charity up here. This ain't no ladies' tea party," he'd whine, seeming to take a particular, unpleasant interest in them, perhaps seeing their obvious vulnerability as an opportunity to assert his meager authority and curry favor with Grimes. Once, he deliberately kicked a pile of loose stones near Mary's feet as she passed, causing her to stumble badly. Nearly falling, Anna shot him a look of pure hatred, hot and sharp, which he returned with a thin-lipped smirk before turning away. Clearly satisfied, Anna clenched her fists, the rough burlap scraping her raw palms. One day, she thought, a dangerous spark igniting within her exhaustion. Fueled by protective fury, one day you'll pay for that smirk. The dust was a relentless, insidious torment. Fine, alkaline powder filled Anna's nose and throat, turning every swallow into grit, invaded her eyes, making them water constantly, and blurring her vision, and made every breath a shallow, rasping effort that felt like inhaling sandpaper. She saw with growing alarm how it affected Mary even more severely, triggering frightening fits of dry, hacking coughs that shook her sister's small frame violently and left her weak, trembling, and breathless, clinging to Anna's arm for support, her face screwed up in pain. Anna instinctively tried to take the heavier loads, tried to position herself between Mary and the watchful eyes of the overseers, tried to shield her sister whenever Grimes made his rounds, his cold pebble eyes sweeping over them, assessing their output with chilling detachment. She learned quickly, brutally, that any sign of weakness invited unwanted, dangerous attention. Near midday, a small rockslide occurred further up the slope, sending a cascade of stones tumbling down with a terrifying roar. No one was hurt this time, but the incident served as a stark reminder of the constant danger surrounding them, adding another layer of fear to their exhaustion and aches. Lunch was a brief, 15-minute mockery of a respite, barely long enough to choke down another portion of the same grim, greasy stew and stone-like bread, eaten sitting on the hard, unforgiving ground under the merciless glare of the midday sun. There was little conversation among the workers. The air was filled only with the sounds of hurried, desperate eating and the heavy, oppressive silence of profound exhaustion, punctuated by coughing and the distant ringing hammers. Anna caught the eye of an older man nearby, his face a leathery mask of ingrained weariness and resignation. He gave her a look that seemed to contain a universe of shared suffering, part pity, part warning, a silent acknowledgement of their mutual damnation in this man-made hell. He quickly looked away, breaking the connection, conserving even the energy required for eye contact, a gesture that spoke volumes about the crushing nature of this place. The afternoon dragged on, each hour stretching into an eternity of aching muscles, burning lungs, and raw hands. Anna's blisters broke, the raw skin stinging fiercely as dust and sweat seeped into the open wounds. Her back felt like it might snap in two. Mary moved slower and slower, her face drawn tight with pain and overwhelming fatigue. Anna saw her stumble badly on a loose patch of shale, nearly falling face first onto the sharp rocks, only catching herself at the last moment with a desperate grab at a larger boulder, letting out a small, choked cry. Just then, Grimes reappeared on his rounds, his presence instantly ratcheting up the already palpable tension like a tightened screw. He stopped near them, his bulky shadow falling over Mary as she struggled to lift a burlap sack laden with rocks, her breath catching in ragged hitches. "You," he growled, his voice low and dangerous, pointing a thick, dirt-encrusted finger directly at Mary. "You call that working? My grandmother could move faster, and she's been dead and buried these 10 years. He took a deliberate step closer, looming over her small form. Mary flinched violently, shrinking back, her eyes wide with sheer terror, tears welling but fiercely held back by sheer will. "Pick up the pace, girl, or you'll feel the strap across your worthless hide. Maybe that'll teach you to earn your keep in Croft's Quarry." Raw fear spurred Mary into a renewed, desperate burst of effort, her small hands scrabbling frantically at the heavy sack, tears now spilling silently down her cheeks, which she quickly wiped away with a dusty forearm, refusing to give Grimes the satisfaction of seeing her break completely. Anna bit her lip harder, tasting the coppery tang of blood mixed with the ever-present dust, forcing herself to keep moving, lifting, carrying, desperate to avoid drawing his malevolent attention further onto either of them. Just survive the day. That became her mantra, repeated silently, desperately. Survive this hour. Survive this minute. Finally, torturously, the sun began its slow descent, painting the western sky in bruised shades of purple and orange, signaling the end of the official workday. But the relief was minimal, tainted by bone-deep exhaustion and the dread of what was to come. Ahead lay only another meager, unpalatable meal, the foul, crowded bunkhouse, and the stark, unavoidable knowledge that tomorrow would bring more of the same grinding, spirit-crushing misery. As they trudged stiffly back towards the bunkhouse, part of the slow, silent procession of defeated men, Mary leaned heavily on Anna, her breathing shallow, ragged, and punctuated by soft, worrying coughs that tore at Anna's heart. I can't do this, Anna," Mary whispered, her voice choked with despair and exhaustion, barely audible above the shuffling feet and weary groans of the other workers. "My chest. It burns." "Yes, you can," Anna insisted, forcing a strength she didn't feel into her own voice, wrapping a protective arm around her sister's trembling shoulders, pulling her closer. "We can. We have to. We just have to take it one day, 1 hour, at a time. Together. We're together. Remember that." But even as she spoke the hollow words of encouragement, a cold dread whispered insidiously in her own heart. For how long? How long can she endure this place? How long can I keep her safe? How long can I? Days bled into weeks, each one a brutal variation on the relentless theme of grueling labor. Gnawing hunger, poor sanitation, and creeping, soul-corroding despair. The quarry became their entire world, a gray, dusty prison bounded by blasted rock faces and the cynical, watchful eyes of their captors. Anna learned, through painful trial and error, to pace herself, to husband her dwindling strength, to compartmentalize the constant aches and pains as much as possible, pushing them into a corner of her mind where they throbbed dully but didn't paralyze her. She learned to wrap torn strips of cloth, scavenged from discarded rags found near the refuse pile, around her hands to protect them. Though they offered little real defense against the relentless friction of rock and burlap, she learned the subtle, dangerous art of reading the moods of Grimes and Finn, and the other taciturn guards Croft employed, knowing when to make herself small and unobtrusive, when to avoid eye contact at all costs, when a flicker of defiance might pass unnoticed, and when it would bring swift, painful retribution. She began to understand the grim hierarchy of the quarry, the unspoken rules, the subtle, temporary alliances formed out of mutual desperation, and the simmering resentments among the workers, most of whom were men trapped by crippling debt, past mistakes, or simply profound misfortune. Their spirits eroded and weathered like the rock faces surrounding them. Kindness was a rare and dangerous commodity. Survival often depended on conserving one's own meager energy, guarding one's small portion of inedible food, and trusting no one too deeply. One evening, an older worker, perhaps reminded of a daughter or sister, tried to covertly slip Mary a small piece of dried fruit he'd clearly saved. Finn saw the exchange from across the yard, strode over, violently reprimanded the man with curses and shoves, confiscated the fruit, and assigned the man extra night duties digging latrines, reinforcing the harsh lesson that compassion was punished. Anna watched, her stomach twisting, feeling utterly powerless. This place doesn't just break bodies. She realized with chilling clarity, it actively tries to break the soul, itself, severing every human connection. Her anxiety about Mary became a constant, gnawing presence, a physical ache in her chest. The quarry's environment was brutal for everyone, a true test of endurance, but it seemed particularly, cruelly hostile to Mary's more delicate constitution and sensitive lungs. The persistent cough, initially dry and hacking, deepened ominously, sometimes shaking her whole body in violent paroxysms that left her breathless, weak, terrified, and clutching her ribs, tears streaming down her face. She lost weight they couldn't afford to lose, her already thin clothes hanging loosely on her increasingly frail frame, making her look even younger and more vulnerable. The vibrant light in her cornflower blue eyes, once filled with curiosity and life, flickered dangerously, sometimes threatening to extinguish altogether, replaced by a dull glaze of pain, fever, and exhaustion. Yet, even in this bleakest of landscapes, Mary clung fiercely to small fragments of beauty, tiny acts of defiance against the crushing monotony. She would point out, with a weak finger, a tiny, impossibly resilient wildflower, pushing its way up between the jagged rocks near the edge of the pit. Its color a startling splash against the overwhelming gray. She'd marvel silently at the intricate, feathery patterns of frost on a shallow puddle during the colder mornings. Sometimes, huddled in their corner of the bunkhouse, exhausted but unable to sleep, she would find a smooth, flat stone and use a charred twig salvaged from the fire pit to sketch fleeting images. A bird in flight remembered from their journey, a honeysuckle blossom from their lost garden, Anna's face etched with worry and determination. These small, secret acts of creation were her way of whispering back against the despair, of holding on to a piece of herself that the quarry couldn't touch, couldn't crush. Anna tried desperately, fiercely, to protect her. She volunteered for the heaviest, most awkward loads, if it meant Mary could take a slightly easier one. Though this often earned her curses from Finn. Think you're strong. Do ya? Just means you can do more. Or suspicious, narrowed glares from Grimes. She started saving portions of her own already inadequate bread ration for Mary, hiding it in her pocket and pretending she wasn't hungry, ignoring the painful gnawing in her own stomach and the lightheadedness that sometimes made the quarry walls seem to swim before her eyes. She held her sister through the long, cold nights when the coughing fits were particularly bad, rocking her gently on the hard earth, whispering fragmented stories of their past life, memories of summer picnics by the creek, their father's booming laugh that could shake the rafters, their mother singing lullabies off-key but with infinite love, desperate attempts to keep the fragile flame of hope alive in Mary, even as her own flickered dangerously low. threatening to be snuffed out by the relentless wind of despair. The incident that solidified their place in the quarry's grim ecosystem, and marked Anna specifically, happened late one afternoon, during a period of chilling rain that turned the pit floor into slippery, treacherous mud, making footing precarious and chilling them to the bone. Mary, weakened by a particularly bad coughing spell, exacerbated by the damp air, faltered while carrying a heavy sack up a steep, unstable slope near where blasting had recently occurred. She slipped in the mud, the sack tumbling from her grasp, its contents spilling down the muddy incline with a clatter. Grimes, appearing seemingly out of nowhere as he often did, his heavy oilskin coat shedding water like a sullen beast, saw her stumble and drop the sack, his face contorted with instantaneous rage. Lazy, clumsy whelp, he roared, his voice cutting through the rain like a physical blow, raising the ever-present leather strap high. As the strap whistled downwards towards Mary's cowering form, Anna reacted without thinking. She didn't pause to consider the consequences, the potential pain, the sheer futility. Pure instinct, fueled by weeks of suppressed love, fear, and accumulated rage, propelled her forward. She threw herself between Grimes and her sister, taking the brutal blow across her own shoulders and back. The pain was white-hot, shocking, stealing her breath and sending spots dancing before her eyes, making her gasp. She stumbled but didn't fall, didn't cry out. She simply stood there, trembling from the impact and the cold, glaring up at Grimes with a ferocity born of utter desperation, a cornered animal defending its young. That momentarily startled even him. "Leave her alone," Anna gasped, her voice shaking but surprisingly clear and steady despite the fire racing across her back. "She's sick. Can't you see she's burning with fever?" Grimes stared at her, his eyes narrowed to slits, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. For a tense, drawn-out moment, the air crackled with violence. The nearby workers froze, silent witnesses holding their breath. Anna thought he would strike her again, harder, or perhaps both of them. The strap twitched menacingly in his thick, wet hand. Then, with a contemptuous snort that dissolved into a phlegmy cough, he slowly lowered it. "Get back to work. Both of you," he snarled, his voice dripping venom, the implied threat hanging heavy in the wet air. "And you." He pointed the soaked end of the strap directly at Anna's face. "Don't think I'll forget this little display. You'll pay for it, one way or another. Count on it." The act earned Anna a grudging, wary respect from a few of the older, harder workers. Men who recognized the spark of defiance they themselves had long suppressed or had beaten out of them. Nods were barely perceptible. Glances held a fraction longer. But it also irrevocably marked her in Grimes's cold, calculating eyes. He watched her more closely after that, his scrutiny a heavy, palpable weight, making the back of her neck prickle whenever he was near. He began assigning her deliberately difficult or dangerous jobs, seemingly testing her limits, waiting, perhaps hoping, for her to break or make a fatal mistake. He once made her spend an entire agonizing day sorting sharp, flinty shards of blasted rock with her bare hands in a distant, isolated corner of the quarry, a pointless, cruel task that left her fingers bleeding, raw, and embedded with painful splinters that festered for days. Another time, he deliberately sent her to work clearing rubble near an obviously unstable overhang, ignoring the muttered warnings of a more experienced miner nearby who shook his head grimly and spat pointedly. Only sheer luck, and the miner's quick, urgent shout, "Girl, move!" prevented her from being caught directly beneath a minor rock slide that sent stones crashing down exactly where she had been standing moments before. Grimes merely watched the near miss from a distance, his expression unreadable, but devoid of any relief or concern. Each act of petty tyranny, each casual demonstration of his absolute power over their lives, chipped away at Anna's resolve, yet simultaneously fueled a cold, deep-seated, simmering rage beneath her carefully maintained mask of outward compliance. She started to think more seriously, more desperately, about escape, a thought previously too terrifying to even contemplate. There must be a way, she began to whisper to herself in the dark, clutching Mary close. There has to be. Before this place kills her, before it breaks me. Autumn arrived, painting the distant, unreachable hills in brief, heartbreaking splashes of gold and red, mocking reminders of a world beyond the quarry walls. It brought only new miseries to the stone serpent pit. Biting winds howled through the canyon, carrying the dust with even greater ferocity, finding every rip and tear in their ragged clothing. And chilling rains turned the quarry floor into a thick, clinging quagmire of mud that sucked at their worn boots and made every step an exhausting, laborious effort. Cold seeped into their bones, a constant, unwelcome companion, making muscles ache perpetually and joints stiffen painfully, especially in the mornings. Their thin, ragged clothes, barely adequate in summer, offered pitiful protection against the damp and chill. Mary's cough worsened dramatically, becoming wetter, more persistent, rattling deep in her chest with a terrifying sound that kept Anna awake long into the night. It was now frequently accompanied by bouts of fever that left her shivering uncontrollably on their miserable pallet of straw and rags, even huddled tightly against Anna for warmth beneath their single, threadbare blanket. Anna felt a cold, sickening panic rising within her, sharp and undeniable. Mary needed rest, proper medicine, nourishing food. Warmth? Things as utterly unattainable as the distant moon in this desolate, God-forsaken place. The vague, desperate thoughts of escape began to solidify into a desperate, terrifying necessity. But the questions hammered at her relentlessly. Where could they possibly go? How could they survive the harsh wilderness in their weakened state, with Mary so ill? Who would possibly help two escaped, penniless girls, branded as debtors or worse by Croft? The risk seemed insurmountable, bordering on suicidal. Yet, the chilling certainty of Mary fading away completely, consumed by the dust and despair if they remained trapped here, was becoming an unbearable torment, outweighing even the paralyzing fear of the unknown dangers beyond the quarry rim. She had to find a way. She had to. Failure was not an option. She started watching the guards more closely, noting their routines, their moments of inattention, tiny glimmers of possibility in the overwhelming darkness. Suddenly, one freezing evening, just before the clanging signal to stop work, a shift in the rock face above where Anna worked, near Finn, became apparent. Not a sudden slide, but a slow, ominous bulge forming high up. Pebbles skittered down. A chunk the size of a wagon wheel began to visibly peel away from the main wall with a grating sound. Finn, standing almost directly beneath it, glanced up, saw it, and just pointed, mouth open, shrieking incoherently, "Look out! It's—" but froze, paralyzed by fear, without thinking, reacting purely on the instinct to avert disaster. Anna shoved him hard sideways, sending him sprawling awkwardly but clear of the direct path, just as the massive rock crashed down where he'd stood moments before, shattering with deafening force, throwing up shards and dust. Finn stared, white-faced and trembling on the ground, looked at the pulverized rock, then scrambled to his feet, his eyes blazing not with gratitude, but with fury and humiliation. He turned on Anna, spitting curses. "Damn you! Trying to kill me, pushing me down, he shrieked. Ignoring the fact she'd saved his life, he stalked away, still muttering, leaving an eerie silence hanging over the nearby work crew who had witnessed it all. Even saving one of them earns hatred here, Anna thought bitterly, her heart pounding from the near miss and the sheer injustice. It felt like a final, bleak sign. Hope wasn't just absent, it was actively punished, twisted into resentment. This isolation felt absolute, colder and sharper than the biting autumn wind. Escape wasn't just necessary, it felt like the only sane choice left, however impossible it seemed. High on the rocky rim of the vast, unnatural basin that held the stone serpent quarry, concealed amongst the gnarled, weathered pinon pines and dusty juniper scrub. Swift Eagle maintained his patient, watchful vigil. For many weeks now, this place, this raw wound upon the earth, had drawn him, a sight of profound dissonance, an ugly discordant note in the familiar, sacred landscape of his people's ancestral hunting grounds. He was Lakota, of the Sikangu Oyate, the Burnt Thigh Band, raised in the ancient rhythms of the plains, his senses exquisitely attuned to the subtle language of the wind whispering through the grasses, the story told by tracks in the earth, the movements of the creatures, winged, four-legged, and crawling, that shared this world. His skills as a scout and hunter were renowned among his people, his movements as silent and purposeful as the owl's flight, his sharp eyes missing little, trained from boyhood to read the land like an open scroll. He had come to this area initially tracking a small band of pronghorn, noting with growing concern how their traditional grazing patterns were shifting, pushed further east by the incessant, unnatural noise, the rhythmic blasting that shook the earth, the constant hammering, the harsh shouting, and the spreading gray scar of the quarry operation. More troubling still, the runoff from the quarry, thick with fine gray sludge, was poisoning a small, vital creek downstream, a creek where his own extended family band often camped, a creek that flowed near the quiet resting places of revered ancestors, turning the water milky and killing the fish. Curiosity, mingled with this deep, personal disquiet, and an inherited unease fostered by generations of stories recounting other Wasatchu white man encroachments and broken promises, led him closer, to the concealing ridges overlooking the pit. What he saw from his hidden vantage points disturbed him profoundly, settling like a cold stone in his gut. It wasn't just the physical wound upon Unsimaka, Mother Earth. The sacred rock ripped open and left bleeding gray dust into the wind, sterilizing the surrounding land and desecrating ground held sacred through generations. It was the palpable suffering of the humans trapped within that wound. He saw men driven like overburdened draft animals, their shoulders slumped in permanent resignation, their movements devoid of spirit, their eyes reflecting the emptiness of the sky above. He witnessed the casual, almost bored brutality of the overseer, Grimes, the sharp crack of his leather strap, a sickening punctuation mark in the quarry's grim, monotonous symphony. He saw the pervasive fear in the eyes of the men whenever Grimes or his rat-faced subordinate approached. And then, his sharp eyes picked out the girls, Anna and Mary. Their presence was a stark, jarring anomaly, their youth and gender a painful, vulnerable contrast to the hardened, weary faces of the men surrounding them. He began to watch them specifically, day after day, his vantage point shifting silently along the rimrock, always remaining unseen, unheard, a shadow among shadows. He saw Anna's fierce, almost animalistic protectiveness, the way she instinctively positioned herself to shield her younger sister from the overseer's malevolent gaze or the harshest labor, the lines of strain and premature responsibility etched deeply onto her young face. He saw Mary's increasing, alarming frailty, the telltale signs of the lung sickness, the worsening cough that shook her small body, the faltering steps, the feverish flush hidden beneath the layers of grime, exacerbated cruelly by the constant, choking dust. He witnessed Grimes's targeted cruelty towards them, Anna's quiet, desperate act of defiance when she took the strap meant for Mary, the almost tangible waves of fear that radiated from them both, a constant, shivering hum beneath the quarry's relentless noise. He even saw Mary's secret drawings on stones, noticing the intensity with which she focused on these small acts, recognizing them as a spirit refusing to be entirely broken, a spark stubbornly flickering in the oppressive gray. This resonated with Swift Eagle on a level deeper than simple pity or abstract outrage. He carried within him the living stories, the painful collective memory of his own people, the forced marches onto barren, unfamiliar reservations, the treaties solemnly made only to be cynically broken by the relentless tide of settlers, prospectors, and soldiers, the precious children taken away, sometimes forcibly, to distant Wasichu boarding schools designed to strip them of their language, their culture, their connection to their families, their very spirit. He saw in the poisoning of the creek and the careless disregard for sacred ground the same pattern of Wasichu encroachment that threatened his people's very existence and disrupted the balance needed for survival. He saw in the sisters' desperate plight a chilling reflection of the same callous disregard for life, the same insatiable, consuming greed for resources, whether gold, land, or human labor, that drove the ever-expanding encroachment on Lakota lands. The near extermination of the sacred Oyati, the buffalo herds, the lifeblood and spiritual center of his people. The quarry and the reservation, though different in their specific forms of captivity, felt like manifestations of the same encroaching shadow, the same sickness spreading over the land and its inhabitants, a deep imbalance disrupting the sacred hoop of life. He had spoken, more than once, during the quiet deliberations around the council fire in their hidden winter camp, relaying his troubling observations to Gray Bear, the wise elder whose words carried great weight, and the other council members. His words were measured, as Lakota tradition dictated, but his conviction burned clear and steady. Two young spirits, Wasichu though they are being crushed like stone beneath the white man's heel. In the place they call Stone Serpent, he had stated plainly, his gaze steady, meeting the eyes of each elder in turn. Their light dims with each passing sun. The younger one carries the shadow sickness in her chest. The dust is stealing her breath. But more than this, their quarry poisons the water our families drink and desecrates the ground where our grandfathers rest. This is not just their suffering. It touches us directly, polluting what sustains us and dishonoring our past. I have watched them for many weeks. Their suffering is great. To witness such injustice, such disrespect to the land and our ancestors, and turn away stains our honor. It mocks the compassion Wakan Tanka, the Great Spirit, teaches us. The discussions that followed were long, serious, weighing compassion against prudence, survival against principle. Caution warred fiercely with conscience. Stone Hand, a respected warrior known for his pragmatic outlook and a deep scar across his cheek from a past encounter with soldiers, voiced the fears shared silently by many. This man, Croft, who owns the quarry, is said to be wealthy, connected to the bluecoats at the forts. He pays them well for protection and turning a blind eye. If we interfere, if we are discovered freeing his property, he could bring soldiers down upon us, seeking retribution. Remember what happened near the Powder River, when we aided those fleeing Cheyenne. We risked the safety of our families, our children, our precious winter stores, for two strangers, two Wasichu children whose people have brought us little but grief and broken promises. Is their plight worth risking our own survival when winter is coming? Silent Walker, an older man revered for his quiet wisdom and deep understanding of the spiritual world, who rarely spoke, but whose words carried immense weight, countered gently but firmly. Is safety found only in turning our backs and closing our eyes? Does the desperate cry of the trapped hawk not reach our ears because its feathers are different from the eagle's? Swift Eagle speaks of a deep wrong being done, not just to these girls, but to the land itself, a desecration that affects us all, poisoning the water that gives life. Ignoring such a wrong may invite a different kind of danger, a sickness settling upon our own spirit, a weakening of our connection to what is right, a shadow over our own campfire. Gray Bear, his ancient face thoughtful, lined like a map of the plains themselves, listened patiently to all perspectives, his eyes seeming to look beyond the flickering firelight into the heart of the matter. Finally, guided by Swift Eagle's persistent reports, the concrete evidence of the quarry's harmful encroachment fouling their vital resources, the weight of Silent Walker's words, and his own deep, abiding sense of justice that transcended tribal lines, he gave his measured assent. The path Swift Eagle proposes is fraught with undeniable danger, he conceded gravely, his gaze sweeping over the concerned faces around the fire. Retaliation is a real possibility, and Stone Hand speaks wisdom born of hard experience. But the path of inaction, of allowing such cruelty and such blatant disrespect for the land and our ancestors to continue unchecked, festering like a wound on the earth near our own lands, when it is within our power to intervene, carries its own slow poison, as Silent Walker reminds us. Swift Eagle, your heart leads you true in this. Your spirit has recognized a great imbalance that must be addressed. Plan carefully. Observe the serpent's movements when it sleeps, when its vigilance wanes. Learn its routines, its moments of carelessness. Choose the moment when the moon hides her face and the wind walks abroad to cover your passage. Take Silent Walker and Stone Hand with you. Let them be your shadow's edge, waiting beyond the serpent's immediate reach, ready to aid your withdrawal should trouble arise. May the spirits of our ancestors whose resting places are disturbed by this intrusion guide your steps, sharpen your senses, cloud the eyes of your enemies, and grant you the silence of the hunting owl. Thus began Swift Eagle's meticulous, painstaking preparation. He dedicated several consecutive nights solely to observing the quarry's nocturnal rhythms, lying concealed in the cold rocks, becoming one with the shadows, enduring the chill wind. He noted the LAX routines of the night guards, typically 2 men, usually huddled near a sputtering fire at the main entrance ramp, prone to drinking smuggled liquor passed amongst the workers or dozing heavily. Their patrols infrequent, cursory, and focused almost entirely on the most obvious escape routes down the main track leading away from the pit. He mapped the quarry's complex layout in the dim starlight and scarce moonlight, identifying blind spots, areas of deep shadow near derelict equipment, silent approaches that avoided loose rock which could betray movement. He examined the deplorable bunkhouse from all angles under the cover of darkness, his keen eyes discovering the loose, warped board near the back wall, slightly askew from the others, possibly loosened over time by the elements or previous escape attempts. He recognized its potential as a quiet, unexpected entry and exit point. Crucially, it was situated remarkably close to the small, relatively isolated space on the bare earth floor where he consistently observed the sisters settling for the night. One night, while observing, he had a close call, A guard, perhaps bored or needing to relieve himself, wandered unexpectedly close to Swift Eagle's hiding spot near the rear of the bunkhouse. Swift Eagle froze, pressing himself flat against the cold rock, barely daring to breathe, listening as the guard muttered to himself before shuffling away, oblivious. The incident reinforced the need for absolute caution and nerve. He then spent several days traversing the broken, difficult country between the quarry and the hidden valley that sheltered the winter camp of his band, memorizing the complex terrain, marking hidden water sources vital for survival, identifying natural rock shelters and dense thickets that offered concealment from potential pursuit. He gathered essential supplies, several pairs of sturdy spare moccasins, generously lined with soft, insulating milkweed fluff. Knowing the sisters would likely be ill-shod or even barefoot, pieces of soft, yet strong, smoked deer hide, cut into strips suitable for binding their feet against the sharp rocks and chilling cold. A concentrated supply of wazana, dried buffalo meat pounded together with chokecherries and rendered kidney fat. A traditional Lakota food incredibly rich in energy. And easy to carry, several full water skins, a small bundle of specific dried herbs known for soothing coughs, prepared by the camp's medicine woman, and a strong, pliable length of braided horsehair rope, useful for traversing steep inclines or assisting the weak. He practiced moving silently through the darkness burdened with these supplies, ensuring he could travel swiftly without hindrance or noise, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders with each step. Finally, he purified himself in the intense heat and steam of the sweat lodge, praying earnestly to Wakantanka for guidance, for clarity of mind, for the courage necessary to succeed, and the wisdom to protect not only the sisters, but also his own people from any potential repercussions, asking the spirits of the ancestors near the poisoned creek to lend him their silence and strength. The night he ultimately chose for the rescue was perfect for his purpose. The moon was but a hidden sliver completely obscured by a thick, low-hanging blanket of clouds that promised rain or snow later, muffling sound and deepening the darkness to an almost palpable blackness. The wind whispered restlessly through the pinon pines and junipers on the ridge, a helpful accomplice, masking any small sounds his passage might inevitably create. Clad in dark, practical buckskins that blended seamlessly with the night shadows, carrying only his razor-sharp hunting knife, sheathed securely at his belt, and the carefully prepared bundle of supplies slung across his back. Swift Eagle descended towards the sleeping quarry like a flowing shadow given form. He moved with the wind, utilizing the natural contours of the land, melting into the patches of deepest darkness between rocks and scrub, timing his movements with the natural sounds of the night, the sighing wind, the distant cry of a hunting owl, to conceal his passage utterly. He skirted wide around the main entrance, catching the low murmur of the guards' voices and the faint, flickering orange glow of their fire far off to his right, confirming their inattentiveness as expected. He approached the rear of the foul-smelling bunkhouse with infinite caution, the stench hitting him like a physical blow even from a distance, a smell of decay, sickness, filth, and despair. The silence here felt different from the silence of the open plains, not peaceful, but thick, heavy, laden with the tension of suppressed suffering and uneasy, troubled dreams. He reached the loose board he had identified, his senses hyper-alert, every nerve ending tingling. Placing his ear flat against the rough, cold wood, he listened intently to the sounds within, the ragged symphony of disturbed sleep, uneven breathing, a muffled, wet cough that sounded painfully familiar, confirming Mary's presence nearby, a low groan, the rustle of filthy straw, through a thin crack between the boards. He could just make out the dim shapes of Anna and Mary huddled together against the far wall, exactly where he expected them to be. Anna's arm protectively around her sister. Just then, a floorboard creaked audibly inside the bunkhouse, much closer than the regular rustles and snores. A man groaned loudly in his sleep, shifting position violently, startling Anna bolt upright, her eyes flying wide with terror in the oppressive dimness. She instinctively clutched Mary tighter, clearly thinking discovery by one of the inhabitants was imminent. Swift Eagle froze outside, hand near his knife. After a tense moment, the man settled back into deep, rasping snoring. The immediate danger passed, but Anna remained frozen for a second longer, rigid with adrenaline and fear. This had to be the moment. While her senses were already sharp with alarm, taking his knife from its sheath, holding his breath, Swift Eagle began to work delicately at the edges of the board where it met the frame, applying steady, careful, upward pressure, leveraging the blade slightly, working it into the gap. The damp wood creaked faintly, protesting the movement with agonizing loudness in the stillness. He froze instantly, every muscle taut, listening with an intensity that seemed to magnify every small sound, the scuttling of a mouse within the walls, a distant cough from deeper inside the bunkhouse. Nothing but the sighing wind outside and the continued internal sounds of the bunkhouse. He resumed his efforts, painstakingly, incrementally easing the board outwards, careful not to snap the aged wood, until the opening was just wide enough for a slender body to squeeze through. He peered inside again, confirming their position in the gloom. Taking a deep, silent breath to steady his own heart, he reached through the narrow opening, his fingers gently, deliberately touching Anna's shoulder. He felt her immediate, silent awakening, the sudden, violent tensing of her body, the sharp, audible intake of breath. Before raw fear could fully take hold and make her cry out, potentially alerting others, he swiftly but gently covered her mouth with his palm, leaning close to the opening, his voice a mere breath, a whisper against her ear, barely louder than the wind. "Do not be afraid," he whispered, the English words slow, deliberate, carefully pronounced, learned over years of cautious interaction at trading posts. "I come to help you. Wake your sister. Be completely silent, utter silence." He saw the whites of her eyes gleaming huge and stark in the oppressive darkness, saw the visible internal struggle raging within her, the sudden, almost unbelievable leap of desperate hope warring fiercely against the ingrained fear and distrust born of their brutal captivity and the recent scare. He waited, holding his breath, his senses still scanning the surroundings, watching as she turned with infinite care, gently roused Mary, instinctively stifled her sister's potential cry of alarm with her own hand, and then gestured urgently, frantically, towards the dark opening in the wall. It happened with astonishing speed, primal instinct, and the sheer desperation of their situation, overriding disbelief and caution. They had nothing left to lose. "Come." Swift Eagle urged again, his voice barely audible above the wind. Quickly now, silently, like shadows leaving no trace. Anna came first, wriggling through the tight, rough-edged space, her thin, worn shift catching momentarily on a sharp splinter, tearing the fabric. Swift Eagle reached further in, his grip firm but gentle on her arm, helping her the rest of the way out into the biting cold. She stood beside him in the night air, shivering violently, her eyes enormous and dark in her dust-streaked face, looking up at him with a mixture of stark terror and dawning, disbelieving wonder. He immediately turned his attention back to the opening for Mary, who was coughing silently into her hand, her small body shaking as she struggled to squeeze through the narrow gap. He eased her out carefully, supporting her surprisingly slight weight, noting with deep concern the palpable, feverish heat radiating from her skin, even through the thin fabric of her clothes. She leaned heavily against Anna, trembling uncontrollably from cold, fear, weakness, and the effort. "We move now," he commanded softly but with undeniable authority, pressing the soft deer-hide foot bindings into their numb hands. "Tie these quickly over your feet. Follow close behind me. No talking, not a single sound. Your lives depend on it." While the sisters fumbled with the unfamiliar bindings on their cold, clumsy feet, their fingers stiff and unresponsive in the darkness, Swift Eagle scanned the immediate surroundings one last, careful time. All seemed quiet. The guards remained by their distant fire. The bunkhouse slept its troubled, oblivious sleep. He turned without another word and melted into the deeper shadows along the quarry's jagged edge, moving away from the structures, trusting, praying, that they would have the strength and courage to follow his silent lead into the unknown. Anna instinctively grabbed Mary's hand, pulling her shivering sister forward into the terrifying, yet undeniably hopeful, embrace of the unknown darkness. The flight from the Stone Serpent Quarry was a desperate, breathless scramble against time, treacherous terrain, and the terrifying, ever-present possibility of discovery. Swift Eagle set a grueling, relentless pace, pushing them hard while the deepest darkness before dawn still offered its precious cloak of invisibility. He led them not towards the easier, more obvious paths leading away from the quarry, paths that would surely be watched, guarded, or easily tracked come morning, but plunged them directly into a chaotic, disorienting maze of steep-sided ravines choked with thorny brush, fields of jagged, unstable boulders that seemed poised to shift, and dense thickets of thorny scrub that tore mercilessly at their thin clothes and skin. The ground underfoot was treacherous in the extreme, littered with loose rock and scree that threatened to twist an ankle or send them tumbling with every single misplaced step in the near-total blackness. Anna focused with tunnel vision on the dim, moving shape of Swift Eagle ahead, concentrating solely on placing one foot carefully in front of the other, on keeping up, on pulling Mary along beside her, her own fear a cold, hard knot tightening relentlessly in her stomach, overridden only by the primal, overwhelming need to get Mary away, to put as much distance as possible between them and the horrors of the quarry before the sun rose and the inevitable alarm was raised. Far, faster, her mind screamed. Before they wake, before they know. The sound of the clanging morning signal echoed menacingly in her memory. Mary struggled valiantly, fueled initially by adrenaline and Anna's unwavering grip. But her profound weakness was terrifyingly apparent. Her breath came in short, harsh, ragged gasps, punctuated by stifled, gut-wrenching coughs that sounded terrifyingly loud in the pre-dawn stillness, each one sending a jolt of fear through Anna, making her flinch. She stumbled frequently on the uneven, unseen ground, her small cries of pain quickly smothered by Anna's hand, or by her own desperate effort not to make noise. Each time she faltered, seeming near collapse, gasping, "Wait, Anna, wait." Swift Eagle would pause instantly, melting back into the shadows like smoke, waiting without a word, his dark silhouette radiating an aura of immense patience and quiet competence, allowing them precious, desperately needed seconds to regroup, catch their breath, before moving relentlessly onward again. He offered water sparingly from his skins, gesturing for small sips, ensuring they didn't drink too much too quickly on exhausted stomachs, knowing it could make them sick or cramp up. At one point, crossing a shallow but fast-flowing stream, its water shockingly, bitingly cold, numbing their feet instantly. Mary slipped on a mossy, unseen rock. Anna cried out, softly, a strangled gasp, Mary, as her sister went under for a heart-stopping second, the current tugging at her thin form. Swift Eagle, reacting with lightning speed, reached back from the bank he'd already gained and hauled her out bodily, his grip like iron. Before the current could sweep her further downstream into deeper water, he helped Anna get her half-drowned, shivering, gasping sister to the far bank, pausing only long enough for Mary to stop choking and catch her breath. The delay agonizingly tense as they stood dripping and exposed. A faint shout echoed from far behind them, distorted by the wind. Was it just the wind howling through a canyon, or pursuing men? Swift Eagle's head snapped up, listening intently, before he urged them forward with a sharp, low hiss. Hours crawled by in a terrifying blur of stumbling, gasping, scrambling, and forcing aching, protesting limbs through the suffocating darkness. The only sounds were their own harsh, labored breathing, the soft scuff of their hide-bound feet on rock and earth, the occasional sharp clatter of a dislodged pebble skittering away into the night, and the relentless, mournful whisper of the wind that seemed to follow them like a pursuing spirit. Anna's legs burned with exhaustion, feeling like lead weights. Her lungs ached with every cold breath drawn, but the potent cocktail of adrenaline surging from the escape and the sheer, unwavering will to get Mary away from the quarry's poisonous dust fueled her beyond what she thought humanly possible. She glanced back constantly over her shoulder, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird, half expecting, fully dreading, to see the pursuing, bobbing lights of lanterns appearing on the ridge behind them, to hear the enraged shouts of Grimes and his men echoing through the canyons. But there was only impenetrable darkness, vast, silent, and utterly indifferent to their desperate plight. Once, she thought she heard a distant dog barking, a sound that sent a fresh wave of icy panic through her, making her stumble. But Swift Eagle didn't react, pressing onward relentlessly, and the sound eventually faded, perhaps just the wind playing tricks on her frayed nerves. Suddenly, the wind picked up dramatically, howling through the rocks, and a cold, driving rain began to fall, quickly turning into stinging sleet that plastered their hair to their faces and soaked through their thin layers in moments. The promised storm had arrived early. There was nowhere to take proper shelter in the exposed, rocky terrain. Swift Eagle found a slight overhang beneath a jumble of large boulders, offering minimal protection, but shielding them from the worst of the driving sleet. They huddled there, soaked to the skin, shivering uncontrollably, the wet cold seeping into their bones, making Mary's cough deeper and wetter, a rattling sound that terrified Anna. The delay felt dangerous, exposed, prolonging their agony, but travel in the blinding sleet and treacherous mud was impossible. They waited, miserable and afraid, listening to the storm rage around them, until the worst of the squall passed, leaving them even colder and more exhausted than before. Just as the first, almost imperceptible hint of dawn began to stain the eastern horizon a pale, washed out, unforgiving gray, revealing a stark rocky landscape of broken hills and sparse, wind-battered pines. Swift Eagle veered sharply off their trajectory, leading them abruptly into a narrow, deeply shadowed, hidden defile choked with ancient, gnarled junipers and massive, protective boulders. Here, completely sheltered from the biting wind and invisible from any casual view from the surrounding ridges, he finally signaled a halt, holding up a hand. He quickly scanned the ground, pointing out the telltale sinuous tracks of a rattlesnake that had recently passed. reminding them with a silent gesture to always watch where they placed their hands and feet in this wild country. "We rest here," he stated, his voice still low but carrying less urgency than before. "Sun comes soon. We cannot risk traveling openly in daylight. They will search now, hard." He carefully opened his deerskin bundle and produced the wazna and the small pouch of herbs. "Eat this. You need strength." He broke off pieces of the energy-rich food for each of them and gestured for Mary to chew a few of the dried leaves from the pouch, explaining with gestures that they would help her chest. The dried meat mixture, dense and oily, was surprisingly rich, slightly sweet from the crushed berries, and incredibly, profoundly welcome after their meager, tasteless quarry rations. They ate ravenously, their hunger painful now that the immediate terror had slightly subsided, huddled close together for warmth against the damp, penetrating chill of the early morning air. The cold rocks pressing against their backs, Anna looked properly at their rescuer for the first time in the slowly growing light, his face framed by long, straight, dark hair held back from his forehead by a simple leather band beaded with a single blue stone, was striking, defined by high cheekbones, a strong, determined jawline, and intelligent eyes that were dark, intensely alert, and held an unexpected depth of weary wisdom and profound compassion that seemed at odds with his fierce competence. He wore practical, well-worn buckskins, scuffed and stained from travel, that blended perfectly, almost uncannily, with the surrounding landscape of rock and scrub. He seemed a part of the land itself, wild and enduring. Who are you?" Anna asked again, the question feeling inadequate, needing the confirmation, the anchor of a name for this silent, imposing figure who had materialized from the darkness and plucked them from the depths of hell. "I am called Swift Eagle," he replied, his dark gaze meeting hers directly, holding it for a moment, acknowledging her question fully. "Of the Sikangu Lakota people." Lakota. Mary breathed the name, pulling her thin, damp shawl tighter around her shoulders, the word evoking a confusing mixture of fear and fascination, echoes of the often terrifying, dehumanizing stories told by settlers around campfires, stories of savage warriors and unpredictable raids. This man seemed anything but savage. He radiated a quiet power and profound stillness. "Why?" Anna pressed, needing desperately to understand the motive behind such an immense risk, such unexpected intervention. "Why did you help us? We are strangers. We are white." The word felt like ash in her mouth, associated now with Croft, Grimes, and the men who had trapped them, a badge of the oppressor. Swift Eagle's gaze shifted, looking out from their hiding place towards the direction of the hated quarry, hidden now by intervening ridges, his expression turning somber, introspective. "The lines men draw between peoples," he said slowly, thoughtfully, his English accented but clear, chosen with care, "are like lines drawn on shifting sand, or lines drawn on water. They are not as strong, not as real, as the lines of suffering that connect all beings who feel pain, who cherish freedom. I saw the cruelty in that place, the waste of life, the disregard for the spirit. I saw your sister weaken, her spirit dimming like a dying fire in the rain. And I saw the gray poison from that pit choke the creek where my kin drink, saw the blasting shake the ground where my ancestors lie, heard the earth cry out, 'My people.'" His voice held a deep, resonant pain, a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. "Know well what it is to lose freedom. We know what it is to see life, our way of life, our sacred connection to the earth, disregarded, trampled by those who crave only yellow metal, or black rock, or endless land. or power over others. It is said among us that a true Lakota heart must be large enough to feel the pain of others, even the pain of enemies. Though you, he turned his gaze back to them, his eyes holding theirs, conveying sincerity, are not enemies. You were captives crying out for freedom in the only way you could, through your endurance, through the small drawings on stone. Sometimes, action is the only prayer that Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, hears clearly above the noise of the world. Sometimes, one must act to protect the water, the land, the sacred balance. Even for those who do not yet understand its worth, he gestured towards the makeshift beds of pine needles he had quickly gathered in the driest spot. Now, rest. Sleep if you can. Fear steals strength as surely as hunger. We move again only when the shadows lengthen and the land gives us cover. The journey unfolded over 3 more arduous, nerve-wracking days, falling into a rhythm dictated by survival and concealment. They moved cautiously during the dim, transitional hours of dawn and dusk, periods when the poor light and long shadows offered the best protection from watchful eyes. They hid during the bright, revealing hours of daylight, finding shelter in deep ravines hidden by cottonwoods whose first spring leaves were just beginning to bud. Dense copses of willow along creek beds discovered by swift eagles' unerring sense for water, or beneath rocky overhangs, scouted out meticulously by their guide. He proved to be an expert, almost preternatural guide, navigating the seemingly trackless wilderness with an uncanny, unerring sense of direction. He read signs completely invisible to Anna and Mary. A single broken twig, bent in a specific way indicating the passage of deer hours before, a faint, almost erased impression in the damp earth near a water source, revealing how recently someone else had passed. He examined this closely, then changed their direction slightly. The sudden, agitated flight pattern of birds overhead warning of unseen presence below, interpreting them instantly, using them to choose their path, avoid potential danger both animal and human, and locate precious, hidden seeps of clean water. He taught them rudimentary, essential skills in quiet, concise lessons, how to move more quietly through brush, placing their feet carefully heel to toe to minimize noise and disturbance, how to scan the ground constantly for the deadly presence of rattlesnakes concealed beneath rocks or in shadowed crevices, pointing out a shed skin coiled near a sunny boulder as evidence, which wild berries were just beginning to ripen and were safe to eat to supplement their meager rations of wazana, and which were poisonous mimics designed by nature to deceive the unwary. He hunted with swift, silent, breathtaking efficiency, once bringing down a plump rabbit with a single, perfectly aimed stone thrown from his sling, stunning it instantly before dispatching it quickly and respectfully. He shared the small bounty generously, roasted expertly over a tiny, carefully constructed, smokeless fire built deep within a rock crevice, hidden from view, the fresh meat restoring a measure of their depleted strength and warming their chilled bodies more effectively than any broth. The terrain remained relentlessly demanding, forcing them to climb steep, rocky slopes that left their muscles screaming and lungs burning, ford icy, fast-flowing streams that numbed their feet and soaked their clothes repeatedly, requiring them to stop and wring out their hems and push their way through dense, thorny thickets that snagged and tore at them relentlessly, leaving long scratches on their arms and faces. Mary, though still clearly exhausted and prone to fits of coughing, especially in the cold mornings, seemed to draw a fragile strength from the clean, crisp air, so different from the quarry's suffocating dust, and the profound absence of the constant, oppressive atmosphere of fear and brutality. Her coughing lessened slightly but perceptibly each day, becoming less frequent and less severe, especially after chewing the herbs Swift Eagle provided consistently. A spark of her former innate curiosity returned to her eyes as she observed Swift Eagle's effortless skills, his deep knowledge of the land, and the unfamiliar plants and animals he pointed out to them with quiet gestures, sometimes mimicking their calls softly. Anna felt her own physical strength slowly returning, her body hardening to the demands of the trail, the blisters on her hands healing into calluses. But the mental tension remained excruciatingly high, the fear of pursuit a constant, cold shadow clinging to her thoughts. Every distant sound, the snap of a twig carried on the wind, the cry of a hawk circling high overhead, the rustle of unseen creatures in the brush, sent a jolt of fresh anxiety through her, making her grip Mary's hand tighter. Once, rounding a bend in a wide canyon, they saw smoke rising steadily in the distance, clearly from a larger campfire than Swift Eagle would ever make. He instantly held up a hand, motioned them back behind cover, and changed their route abruptly, leading them on a wide, time-consuming detour through much rougher country without explanation, his face grim and watchful. Someone else out here, Anna thought, her stomach churning. Prospectors, trappers, soldiers, friend or foe. We can't know. The incident emphasized their vulnerability. On the afternoon of the fourth grueling day since their escape, they climbed a long, windswept, rocky ridge, the effort leaving them breathless. The wind was sharper here, carrying the clean, invigorating scent of pine and damp earth, hinting at higher elevations. As they finally reached the crest, utterly spent, lungs heaving, Swift Eagle stopped abruptly and pointed downwards, a rare, small smile touching his lips. Below them, nestled in a wide, surprisingly fertile valley, protected on all sides by sheltering, pine-clad hills, lay the Lakota winter camp, a scattered community of sturdy, smoke-darkened teepees, thin plumes of gray smoke curling lazily from their peaks into the clear blue sky, stood clustered near a winding, ice-fringed creek lined with tall cottonwood trees, their branches already showing the faint green haze of new spring buds against the late autumn sky. A herd of sturdy, shaggy ponies grazed peacefully within a makeshift corral fashioned from poles and brush near the creek. Figures moved purposefully about the camp, women scraping and stretching hides on wooden frames, their movements practiced and efficient, men mending harnesses or sharpening tools near a central fire, children darting between the lodges, their laughter carrying faintly on the wind, their activities imbued with a palpable sense of community, calm, and unhurried purpose that felt worlds away from the frantic, fearful, desperate energy of the quarry. It looked like a haven, a place of peace and order. My people, Swift Eagle said simply, his voice holding a quiet note of deep pride and belonging. Wichita, our winter camp, you will be safe among them now. No harm will come to you here. Descending into the sheltered valley felt like stepping across an invisible threshold into another world, another reality entirely. As they approached the outer edge of the camp, following Swift Eagle, the Lakota people paused their various activities, the women skillfully tanning hides with bone scrapers, their hands moving with ingrained knowledge passed down through generations, the men inspecting their bows or conversing quietly in small groups, the children momentarily halting their noisy games involving hoops and sticks, turning to watch the arrival of their scout and the two exhausted, ragged, dusty, unmistakably Wasatchu girls accompanying him. They watched with open, undisguised curiosity, their expressions ranging from neutral observation to guarded watchfulness. But Anna saw no immediate hostility in their gaze, only a quiet, waiting assessment. Swift Eagle led them confidently towards the largest teepee, distinguished by painted symbols near its entrance flap, depicting buffalo and eagles. Situated near the center of the camp circle, an elderly man, his face a magnificent, intricate map of wrinkles carved by decades of sun, wind, wisdom, and sorrow, emerged slowly from the lodge entrance, stooping slightly, but carrying himself with immense dignity. His long gray hair was neatly braided, and he wore a simple buckskin shirt adorned with beautiful, intricate quillwork. His presence commanded immediate, unspoken respect from all who turned towards him. This, Anna knew instinctively, must be Gray Bear. Swift Eagle spoke respectfully in the flowing, melodic Lakota language, his tone conveying the gravity of their journey, the injustice they had suffered, their desperate situation, and their perilous flight, specifically mentioning the desecration of the creek and land near the quarry, alongside their plight, occasionally gesturing towards Anna and Mary as he explained his reasons for intervening. Gray Bear listened intently, his weathered face impassive, betraying little emotion, his keen, intelligent gaze moving slowly between Swift Eagle, whose earnestness was clear, and the two exhausted, dust-covered, frightened white girls who stood shivering before him, acutely aware of their foreignness and vulnerability. He observed them for a long, silent moment, his ancient eyes seeming to penetrate beyond their fear and grime, assessing their spirits, their character, the hardship etched into their faces. Anna held her breath, feeling intensely vulnerable under his scrutiny, desperately hoping he would see their need, their shared humanity, not just their different skin or the troubles their people often brought. Finally, he nodded slowly, a barely perceptible movement, and spoke, his voice low, but carrying an undeniable weight of authority and wisdom that resonated through the crisp air, calming the curious onlookers. Swift Eagle turned back to them, his expression visibly relieved. Gray Bear, our Te Wahapi, our sacred elder, welcomes you to our fire circle. He says the Great Spirit, Wakantanka, often works in ways unseen, like the roots that nourish the tree hidden beneath the earth, and sometimes brings strangers together for reasons we do not immediately understand. He sees the great hardship you carry in your eyes, the shadow of the place you fled, the place that disrespects the earth and the spirits who dwell there. He offers you the shelter of our lodges, the warmth of our fires, the food from our hunts, for as long as you need sanctuary and healing. He asks only that you respect our ways and our sacred ceremonies while you heal among us. You are guests under his protection. No harm shall befall you here. Relief washed over Anna, so profound and unexpected it made her knees weak, threatening to buckle. Tears sprang to her eyes, tears of gratitude this time, not despair, blurring the scene before her. Swift Eagle then gently guided them towards a nearby teepee, smaller but well kept, smoke rising invitingly from its peak, where a woman with kind, intelligent eyes, her dark hair neatly braided and threaded with strands of silver, indicating maturity and status, greeted them with a gentle, welcoming smile that needed no translation. Her face radiated a quiet strength and compassion. This is Bright Willow. Swift Eagle introduced them simply. She is a woman of good heart, known for her wisdom and generosity. Her lodge will be your home for now. Bright Willow gestured for them to enter her teepee. Stepping inside was like entering a sanctuary, a different universe from the quarry bunkhouse. The circular space was warm, clean, and smelled faintly, pleasantly, of sage, wood smoke, and tanned hides. Thick, soft buffalo robes covered the ground, offering a welcome, almost unimaginable softness after days on the unforgiving trail and months on the cold, hard-packed earth of the quarry bunkhouse floor. A small fire glowed warmly in the central fire pit dug into the earth, the smoke rising efficiently through the adjustable opening at the top. Colorful painted liners adorned the lower walls, depicting scenes of buffalo hunts and starry nights, adding beauty and insulation. Bright willow, moving with quiet grace and efficiency, offered them steaming broth, rich with meat and wild vegetables, in intricately carved wooden bowls, and gestured towards a pile of soft furs near the back of the lodge, her manner conveying simple, unambiguous welcome and deep concern for their obvious exhaustion and frailty. Exhausted beyond measure, emotionally and physically drained, Anna and Mary collapsed onto the offered robes, the feeling of safety so absolute, so overwhelming after their long ordeal. It was almost painful, bringing fresh tears to Anna's eyes. Sleep claimed them almost instantly, a deep, profound, dreamless slumber, cocooned in warmth and the unexpected kindness of strangers. The first truly peaceful rest they had known in what felt like a lifetime. Their life among the Sikangu Lakota unfolded slowly, cautiously, like a frozen landscape gradually thawing under the gentle persistence of the spring sun. The first, most urgent priority was healing, especially for Mary, whose condition remained precarious despite the immediate improvement from leaving the dust behind. Bright Willow, whose quiet competence radiated reassurance and deep knowledge, aided by other women of the camp skilled in the ancient arts of traditional medicine, particularly an elderly, highly respected medicine woman named Dear Woman, with eyes that seemed to see deep inside, tended to her constantly and patiently. They brewed potent, steaming herbal teas from roots, bark, and leaves gathered along the creek bed and in the surrounding hills before the snows deepened, brews specifically designed to soothe her inflamed lungs, break up the congestion, and ease the persistent, racking cough. The teas tasted bitter and earthy, but Mary drank them dutifully. They applied warm poultices of crushed herbs, smelling strongly of pine resin and sage, wrapped in soft doe skin, to her chest and back, changing them regularly with gentle hands that never seemed rushed. They ensured she rested, kept warm beneath layers of soft furs, consuming nourishing, easily digestible broths and stews rich with tender game meat, wild turnips painstakingly dug from the frozen ground, and fortifying marrow scraped from bones cracked open specifically for her. Slowly, almost miraculously, over weeks that blurred into a month, Mary began to truly mend. The terrible, racking cough that had seemed torn from her very depths subsided gradually, becoming less frequent, less violent, replaced by clearer, easier breathing. The persistent low-grade fever broke and did not return. Healthy color slowly returned to her pale cheeks, washing away the gray pallor of the quarry dust that had seemed ingrained. The haunted, terrified look that had resided deep in her eyes began to soften, replaced by a growing, quiet awareness and genuine curiosity about her unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting, new surroundings. She began to truly see the intricate patterns in the beadwork on Bright Willow's dress, the subtle shifts of light on the teepee walls as the sun moved, the deep kindness etched around Bright Willow's eyes when she smiled. Anna, too, began to heal, though her recovery was as much mental and emotional as it was physical. The constant grinding tension of the quarry, the perpetual state of hypervigilance and fear that had become her default state, slowly eased its suffocating grip day by painful day, like unwinding a tightly coiled spring that had been wound too tight for too long. She gradually learned to sleep through the night without jolting awake at every small sound, the crackle of the fire, the sigh of the wind against the teepee cover, a dog barking outside, convinced it was Grimes or Finn approaching. She learned to eat without the instinctive fear that her meager portion would be stolen or snatched away, to accept offered food without suspicion or the need to hoard it, gradually savoring the different, richer flavors. She learned to walk through the bustling camp without instinctively cringing or flinching from expected blows or harsh words, slowly unlearning the brutal lessons of the quarry, the pervasive, matter-of-fact kindness of the Lakota people, especially the quiet, maternal warmth of Bright Willow, who treated them with the same gentle consideration she showed her own extended family, was a soothing balm to her deeply wounded spirit. It wasn't effusive or intrusive. It was practical, steady, consistent, and utterly genuine, expressed through shared tasks, patient instruction, and quiet smiles that reached the eyes. They were included, naturally and without fanfare, in the daily life of the camp. As their strength returned, they were given tasks appropriate to their abilities and the changing seasons, helping Bright Willow gather scarce firewood from the surrounding hillsides as winter deepened, a task that warmed them twice, learning the strenuous but strangely satisfying process of scraping the last remnants of flesh and fat from thick buffalo hides, stretched taut on wooden frames under the weak winter sun, their arms aching afterwards in a good way, grinding dried corn stored from the autumn harvest into meal between smooth, heavy stones, a rhythmic, meditative activity, mending worn buckskin clothing and moccasins with pointed bone awls and strong sinew thread, their fingers slowly becoming more nimble. Work here was purposeful, necessary, contributing directly to the well-being of the community, entirely different from the soul-crushing, pointless, exploitative labor of the quarry. This feels real, Anna often thought, her hands aching from scraping hide, but her spirit lighter than it had been in months. This matters. What we do makes a difference. However, not everyone was instantly welcoming. Stone Hand, the pragmatic warrior, remained observant and somewhat distant, his gaze often assessing them, though never unkindly. Some of the younger men, whose families perhaps struggled more with dwindling resources, exacerbated by shrinking hunting grounds, occasionally cast resentful glances their way, murmuring comments in Lakota that Swift Eagle quietly deflected if he was present. It was a subtle reminder that their presence, while accepted by the leadership, was still an anomaly, a potential burden in difficult times. Language remained a significant barrier initially, leading to frustrating moments of misunderstanding and reliance on pantomime. But communication happened effectively through gestures, patient smiles, shared tasks, and the dedicated efforts of Swift Eagle, who visited their lodge often when not scouting or hunting, and a few others, like the friendly, outgoing young man named Kicking Bear, who had engaged in more trade with whites near the agencies and knew a smattering of English words. To translate and bridge the gap, Anna and Mary began painstakingly picking up essential Lakota words and phrases. How a general greeting they learned to use. Appropriately, Pilamaya thank you, a word they used constantly, feeling its inadequacy for the kindness received. Woyut food, Dotni, water, PTE buffalo, the sacred center of Lakota life, mentioned with reverence. Chani wood for the fire. Dousni cold, a word they used often. Mary, possessing an artist's keen eye for detail and a natural curiosity undimmed by her ordeal, seemed to absorb the new language more quickly, often delighting Bright Willow by pointing to everyday objects, a bull wickage, a moccasin, HAPA, the fire, Feta, and carefully repeating their Lakota names until she got the pronunciation right. her brow furrowed in concentration. One afternoon, a small girl giggled loudly as Mary stumbled over the pronunciation of the word for rabbit masti, kala. But Bright Willow gently corrected the child with a soft word and smiled encouragingly at Mary. These small interactions built fragile bridges of understanding and acceptance. Mary also rediscovered her innate love for drawing, a part of herself she thought the quarry had extinguished forever along with her health. Lacking paper and pencils, she adapted resourcefully. Using smoothed pieces of birch bark scavenged from near the frozen creek, scraped pieces of leftover hide stretched taut over small frames Bright Willow helped her make, charcoal sticks plucked carefully from the cooled fire pit, and natural pigments made by crushing soft, ochre-colored rocks into powder, mixed with tallow or mashing vibrant dried berries saved from the autumn harvest. She drew everything she saw with increasing confidence and skill, the elegant, conical shapes of the teepees silhouetted against the vast, ever-changing prairie sky, sometimes stark under the winter sun, sometimes softened by falling snow, the intricate, geometric patterns of beadwork and quillwork adorning moccasins, pipe bags and cradle boards, marveling at the patience and artistry, the laughing, curious faces of the Lakota children who, after initial shyness and cautious observation, gradually accepted the two quiet Wasatchu girls into their boisterous winter games of sliding on frozen hides, down snowy banks, or playing snow snake, the noble, stoic profile of Swift Eagle, as he sat listening intently by the council fire, his gaze distant, the wise, kind, deeply lined face of Bright Willow, as she worked patiently on a hide or told stories in the evenings, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. Her drawings became more than just a pastime. They became a bridge, a way for her to process her experiences, to see and truly appreciate the beauty, resilience, and intricate culture of this new world, and eventually, a way to share her unique perspective with her generous hosts, who examined her creations with genuine interest and quiet appreciation, often recognizing the subjects and commenting softly in Lakota amongst themselves. One evening, gathering her courage, she shyly presented Bright Willow with a detailed drawing of a meadowlark perched on a branch, sketched on a carefully prepared piece of hide. Bright Willow's surprised and genuinely touched smile was all the thanks Mary needed, warming her more than the fire. Anna found a different kind of solace, a deep sense of grounding in the steady, ancient rhythms of Lakota daily life and the vast, silent landscape that surrounded their sheltered valley. She learned the immense patience required to transform a stiff, raw buffalo hide into soft, pliable leather through hours of laborious scraping and rubbing with a mixture of brains and liver, followed by smoking over a smoldering fire, a physically demanding task that connected her viscerally to the source of their sustenance and clothing, respecting the animal whose life sustained them. She mastered the essential skill of starting a fire, using friction, patiently twirling a hardwood drill against a cottonwood fireboard until a glowing coal appeared, a small miracle of heat and light against the winter cold that always filled her with quiet satisfaction. She participated fully in the communal efforts involved in surviving the harsh plains winter, helping the women gather and dry large quantities of hoarded berries and edible roots stored in parfleche caches, cutting and smoking strips of buffalo meat from a successful hunt led by Swift Eagle and Stone Hand, learning which cuts were best for drying, reinforcing the teepee coverings with extra hides and banking snow against the base to ward off the fierce winds and heavy snows. She listened, utterly fascinated, during the long, cold evenings, huddled near the fire in Bright Willow's lodge, as Gray Bear or other elders recounted the sacred stories of the Lakota people, tales passed down through countless generations, stories of heroism and sacrifice. cautionary tales involving Iktomi, the trickster spirit, whose antics often served as moral lessons about foolishness or greed. The complex narrative of the creation of the world and the Lakota emergence onto the plains. The profound, sacred relationship with the buffalo and the land that sustained them. Slowly, tentatively, she began to grasp the deep spiritual connection that underpinned every aspect of Lakota society. The reverence for Wakantanka, the great spirit or great mystery, present in all things, and the intricate, interconnected web of life that bound all things together, rocks, plants, animals, humans, stars. She saw how this deeply ingrained worldview informed their actions, their generosity, their courage, their respect for the earth, the very qualities that had led Swift Eagle to risk everything for two unknown, insignificant white girls, and to defend the land itself from the poison of the quarry. She compared it often, silently, critically, to the harsh, unforgiving dogma she had been taught as a child, which seemed so disconnected from the living world around her, focused more on sin and judgment than on balance and connection. She observed a quiet pipe ceremony held to give thanks after the successful hunt, feeling the deep reverence and sense of community that permeated the ritual, even without understanding all the words, recognizing the sacredness of the offering. Swift Eagle remained a figure of quiet strength, unwavering integrity, and gentle guidance throughout their stay. He never pried into their past beyond what they chose, haltingly, tearfully sometimes, to share with him and Bright Willow around the fire late at night. But he was always available to answer their tentative questions about camp life, to explain complex customs or beliefs, to offer quiet reassurance when memories of the quarry surfaced in nightmares that left Anna gasping or Mary weeping silently into her furs. He occasionally took Anna and Mary on short excursions away from the immediate vicinity of the camp, teaching them more about the surrounding land, even under its winter mantle, how to read the subtle story told by tracks left in fresh snow, identifying not just the animal like deer or wolf, but its direction, speed, and even intent. See how deep this track, moving fast, something startled. How to identify different trees like cottonwood, willow, and ash by their bark and dormant bud shape. How to find natural shelter in a sudden blizzard by using snowdrifts and terrain features. He showed them the vastness and the intimate beauty of the plains and the rolling hills, blanketed in white, sparkling under the winter sun, so profoundly different from the suffocating gray, man-made confines of the quarry pit. He spoke, sometimes, with a quiet, sorrowful gravity, about the immense challenges his own people faced, the relentless pressure from the advancing white world, the shrinking buffalo herds pushed further and further away by railways and settlers, the broken treaties ignored by the government in Washington, the constant struggle to maintain their traditional way of life, their freedom, their very identity, in the face of overwhelming military force and deliberate government policies aimed at their confinement, assimilation, or destruction. He did so without overt bitterness, but with a deep, resonant sorrow and a quiet determination that resonated powerfully with Anna's own raw experiences of injustice and exploitation at the hands of powerful, greedy men like Croft. His words planted seeds of understanding about the larger forces shaping their world, forces that created places like the Quarry and threatened the Lakota way of life, connecting their personal suffering to a larger pattern. Winter settled over the valley like a vast, silent white blanket, burying the land under deep drifts of snow, isolating the camp further. Life turned inwards, becoming more focused around the warmth and light of the teepee fires. Days were spent mending hunting gear and winter clothing, crafting intricate and beautiful beadwork or quillwork designs onto hides, sharing dwindling food supplies carefully, telling stories that reinforced cultural values and history, and strengthening the bonds of community through shared hardship and mutual reliance. Small, hardy hunting parties still ventured out periodically, facing harsh, often dangerous conditions, blinding blizzards, treacherous ice, extreme cold that could freeze a man solid to provide essential fresh meat for the band. Anna and Mary learned to construct functional snowshoes from bent willow branches and rawhide strips, essential for moving through the deep snow to gather firewood, helped Bright Willow prepare and ration the precious winter stores with meticulous care, noting the dwindling supplies with quiet concern, and gradually learned to endure the intense cold with the same stoic resilience as their Lakota hosts, layering hides and furs, learning to move briskly to stay warm when outside. They witnessed the hardships firsthand, the shared anxiety when hunters were delayed by blizzards, the worried glances at the dwindling piles of firewood as storms raged, the careful, meticulous rationing of dried food supplies, but also the incredible strength of the community, the way everyone shared what little they had without question, ensuring that no one, especially the elders and children, went hungry or suffered unduly from the cold. It was a stark, humbling contrast to the dog-eat-dog, every man for himself mentality that permeated the quarry. Here, Anna reflected one night, listening to the blizzard howl outside while safe and warm inside the teepee. The fire-casting dancing shadows dot people face hardship together as one family. At the quarry, hardship was used to turn men against each other, make them meaner. During a particularly fierce blizzard that raged for several days, confining everyone to their lodges, the wind howling like hungry wolves outside, piling snow high against the teepee walls, making small drifts inside the entrance flap. Bright Willow shared more of her own story with the sisters, her quiet Lakota words patiently translated by Swift Eagle, who had sought shelter in their lodge from the storm. She spoke of her husband, a brave and respected warrior named Charging Hawk, killed several years earlier, defending their traditional hunting grounds near the Black Hills from encroaching gold prospectors who disregarded sacred sites and warnings to stay away. She spoke, her voice thick with remembered pain but without bitterness, her gaze distant, of her two young children, a boy and a girl, lost during a devastating outbreak of the coughing sickness, likely measles or whooping cough, that swept through the camp like wildfire a few winters past. Diseases brought unknowingly by the white man, against which the Lakota had little natural immunity. She spoke of her quiet determination to keep their memory alive through her work, her contributions to the community, her care for her orphan nephew, and her adherence to the traditional ways that gave her strength and purpose. Her quiet strength, her profound resilience in the face of unimaginable loss, deeply moved both Anna and Mary, forging an even stronger, unspoken bond of shared sorrow and respect between them. Anna saw her own grief reflected, yet transformed, in Bright Willow's quiet dignity and acceptance, a different path than the simmering rage she still felt towards Croft. Mary, meanwhile, found a deep and abiding interest in the healing arts, fueled by her own recovery and her growing bond with Bright Willow and Dear Woman. Under the patient tutelage of these knowledgeable women, she became increasingly adept at recognizing medicinal plants, even in their dormant winter state by their roots or dried stalks protruding through the snow, and learning the proper ways to prepare them as remedies, often involving specific prayers and rituals alongside the physical preparation, which she watched with quiet respect. She learned which roots, like slippery elm, eased persistent coughs, which leaves skillfully dried could reduce fevers when brewed into tea, which poultices made from chewed inner bark or specific clays soothed burns or drew out infection from wounds. Her hands, once destined only for the brutal, scarring labor of the quarry rubble pile, proved surprisingly gentle and skillful in grinding dried roots into fine powder using a stone mortar and pestle, carefully mixing poultices with precise amounts of tallow or water, and tending to minor ailments, cuts from tools, lingering coughs, snowblindness from the glare, within Bright Willow's extended family circle, always under the watchful eye and gentle correction of her mentors. She found a quiet, profound satisfaction in this knowledge, in the ability to offer comfort and aid, a growing sense that she could perhaps offer healing and solace instead of just enduring pain and suffering. It gave her a sense of purpose, a potential path forward, that she had never expected to find in such unlikely circumstances. As the deep snows of winter finally began to melt under the returning strength of the spring sun, revealing the slumbering brown earth beneath in patches, sending rivulets of meltwater towards the swelling creek, a restless energy grew within Anna. The Lakota camp had become a true sanctuary, a place of profound healing and unexpected belonging. Bright Willow felt almost like a mother, her quiet warmth a constant source of comfort. Swift Eagle felt like a respected elder brother, a protector and guide. The community, despite the subtle undercurrents of caution from some, had shown them immense generosity and offered a source of strength, knowledge, and genuine human connection unlike anything she had ever known. But deep down, she knew, with a certainty that grew stronger each day as the land reawakened and the geese returned, that it was not their world to remain in forever. The vivid, horrifying memory of the stone serpent quarry, of Grimes's casual brutality, of Finn's sniveling cruelty, of Silas Croft's faceless, avaricious greed that treated human beings as disposable commodities less valuable than the stone they extracted, remained stark and deeply etched in her mind. A wound that kindness could soothe but not erase. The knowledge that such places existed, that other people, men, women, perhaps even other children, might be suffering as they had, perhaps even now, gnawed relentlessly at her conscience. And the memory of the poisoned creek, the dead fish floating belly up, the disregard for sacred ground that Swift Eagle had fought to protect even as he rescued them, added another urgent layer. Croft's greed harmed everyone, not just his captives, polluting the world beyond the quarry walls. Silence felt like a betrayal of themselves, of any others trapped, and perhaps most importantly, a betrayal of the Lakota who had risked so much to save them, and whose own lands and way of life were threatened by such men. Staying silent, disappearing into this haven, would make their rescue meaningless in a larger sense. It would condone Croft's actions through inaction. She spoke with Mary late one evening, as they sat together just outside Bright Willow's tepee, watching the first stars emerge in the vast, clear spring sky, appearing thicker, brighter, and closer here in the unpolluted air than Anna had ever imagined possible back east. The air smelled of damp earth, new growth, and the faint scent of wood smoke from the lodges. Mary, she began hesitantly, turning a smooth creek stone over in her hand, unsure how her sister, who seemed to have found a measure of peace and purpose here, her cough almost entirely gone, would react. We've been here through the whole winter now. The snows are melting. Travel is possible again. We're strong again. We're healthy. Thanks to these incredibly good people. Mary nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the distant western horizon where the sun had set in a blaze of orange and purple. I know, Anna. Bright willow, deer woman, swift eagle, gray bear. They saved us, in more ways than one. She paused, tracing a pattern on the ground with a twig, then added softly, I, I almost feel like I belong here sometimes. Like this could be home. Helping dear woman, learning the healing ways. It feels right, meaningful. A flicker of fear crossed her face at the unspoken implication of Anna's words. Are you thinking, we have to leave? Yes, Anna admitted quietly. The single word heavy. The thought of leaving the safety, the community, the sheer sanity of the valley was daunting, terrifying in its own way, like stepping back into the cold, more than any place I've ever known before the quarry. But she took a deep breath, forcing herself to say the difficult words that had been forming for weeks. We don't belong here. Not truly. Not in the way they do. This is their sacred land, their struggle against encroaching forces. Our path. It has to lie elsewhere now. Remember what we talked about back in the quarry, in those first terrible weeks, whispering under that awful blanket, coughing in the dark. If we ever got out, about telling our story, about trying, somehow, to stop men like Croft, to expose what they do so it can't happen to others. So they can't just carve up the land and poison water wherever they please, thinking no one will notice or care. Mary turned to look directly at her sister, her cornflower blue eyes serious and thoughtful in the gathering twilight. The deep-seated fear she had carried for so long was still there. Anna could see faint traces of it lingering in the depths, like old bruises on the soul, but it was overlaid now with a quiet determination, a resilience she had absorbed from the Lakota spirit surrounding them, from her own survival. I remember. Anna, she said softly but firmly, meeting Anna's gaze without flinching. I haven't forgotten. Not for a single moment. The quarry, the dust, Grimes's face, the constant fear. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago, like a horrible nightmare someone else lived through. But it's always there, inside. She touched her chest lightly, where the worst of the pain had been. I don't want anyone else to suffer like that, to feel that powerless, that hopeless. And I don't want what happened to that creek, that life-giving water turned gray and dead, to happen everywhere. I want to help others, like Bright Willow and Dear Woman helped me. Maybe the healing ways they taught me can help someone, somewhere, someday. But first, we have to speak. We have to warn people, and we can write it down, Anna affirmed, feeling her own resolve harden, solidifying into concrete purpose, chasing away the fear of leaving. Your drawings, Mary, they show the truth better than words sometimes. My words, your pictures. We can find someone, a newspaper maybe, in a bigger town, or a sympathetic official back east eventually. Someone who will listen, who will believe us, who will print our story. We have to let people know what happens in those hidden, forgotten places, run by men who think laws don't apply to them and that the land is just dirt to be dug up and discarded. It's the only way we can truly honor what Swift Eagle risked for us, what Gray Bear and Bright Willow and all these people have given us, our lives back, our spirits healed. We can't just disappear into safety and stay silent. Silence protects men like Croft and allows the suffering, both human and environmental, to continue. Their difficult, heavy decision made. They knew the next step was to speak with Gray Bear and Swift Eagle. It felt incredibly difficult, almost like a rejection of the overwhelming kindness and sanctuary they had received, a sanctuary that had truly saved their lives. Approaching the main council fire one evening, where the elders and other respected members of the band often gathered to discuss camp matters as the days grew longer. Their hearts felt heavy but resolute. with Swift Eagle standing beside them, his familiar presence offering quiet support, ready to translate Anna's halting but heartfelt words. They explained their profound gratitude, their deep respect for the Lakota way of life that had healed them body and soul, and their inescapable, growing need to leave and pursue their difficult, uncertain mission. You rescued us from the serpent's pit when we had no hope left, when we thought we would surely die there in the dust, Anna began, looking directly at Gray Bear, whose wise, ancient eyes watched her intently, then shifting her gaze gratefully to Swift Eagle, whose expression was serious, perhaps a little sad, but understanding. You healed our bodies when we were broken and sick. You sheltered our spirits when they were bruised and afraid. You shared your food, your warmth, your knowledge, when we had nothing. You taught us the true meaning of courage, community, and respect for the earth and all its beings, things we never truly understood before. We carry the Lakota way in our hearts now, and it will stay with us forever, shaping who we are. But our fight, the path we must now walk, lies back in the world we came from. The world that allows places like the Quarry to exist, hidden in the shadows. The world that doesn't see the poison spreading from such places, affecting everyone downstream, even those who live differently. We must speak the truth of what we saw, what was done to us, and what is likely still being done to others. We must speak for all those who might still be trapped, for those who cannot speak for themselves, and for the land that suffers silently under such disrespect. It is the only way we know to try and repay the immense debt we owe you, a debt that can never truly be measured or repaid in hides or horses. She paused, taking a shaky breath, looking at Mary, who nodded encouragement. It is time for us to leave the nest, even though it feels like the only safe place we have ever known. Gray Bear listened in profound silence, his ancient face impassive, revealing nothing of his thoughts initially, but his eyes held a deep kindness, an understanding that transcended words or cultural barriers. When Anna finished speaking, her voice trembling slightly with emotion and the difficulty of expressing their departure, there was a long pause, broken only by the soft crackling and spitting of the central fire, sending sparks towards the stars, visible through the smoke hole above. Then, he finally spoke, his voice gentle but carrying its usual authority, his Lakota words flowing smoothly like water over stones. Swift Eagle translated his elder's words carefully. The fledgling hawk, once its broken wing is healed and strong again, must eventually test its strength against the wind, must learn to soar on its own currents. It cannot remain in the nest forever, no matter how safe the perch seems. Your hearts speak with truth, young sisters, and truth carries its own power, its own wakan, its own sacred energy. The Wasatch world is full of loud noises, distractions, and much confusion. It does not always listen to quiet truths spoken from the heart. It often prefers comfortable lies and turns away from unpleasant realities, like the suffering in that quarry or the poison in the water. But Gray Bear leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense, meeting Anna's and then Mary's, his eyes seeming to impart strength. Speak your truth anyway. Speak it loudly. Speak it clearly. Do not let fear or doubt silence the message you carry. Speak it for the voiceless ones whose suffering goes unheard in the halls of power. Speak it for Onsimaka, the earth that suffers from the greed and disrespect you witnessed, the disrespect that touched our own sacred places and threatens our way of life. Speak it for yourselves, for the continued healing of your own spirits. For speaking truth is strong medicine, purifying the heart. Know this, the Sikangu Lakota will remember Anna who stood strong and Mary who sees clearly. Our prayers for your safety, your courage, and your success will travel with you on the wind, wherever your path may lead you. Swift Eagle looked at them then, a complex mixture of pride, brotherly concern, and profound sadness flickering in his dark eyes. "It will be dangerous," he stated quietly, his gaze holding Anna's, conveying the gravity of their undertaking more plainly than Gray Bear had. "Far more dangerous, perhaps, than escaping the quarry itself. Out there, in your world, you will be alone again, vulnerable. Croft is a man of influence, they say, with long arms that reach further than you might think. His anger at being defied, at losing property, will be great. He will not want the truth about his methods, his slave labor, or his disregard for boundaries and other people's resources known. He may still be searching for you, wanting to silence you permanently." This was a fear Anna hadn't allowed herself to dwell on too much, pushing it down. But Swift Eagle's stark words brought it sharply, chillingly into focus. The threat wasn't necessarily over just because they were free from the pit. It might just be beginning. "We know," Anna replied, her voice barely a whisper, but firm, strengthened by Gray Bear's blessing and her own resolve. "We know the risks, but we won't be truly alone. Not anymore, not inside. We carry everything we learned here inside us. Your strength, your kindness, your connection to what's real." She glanced at Mary, who nodded in silent agreement, her hand instinctively going to the small leather pouch of herbs dear woman had given her, a tangible link to the healing she had received and hoped to offer others someday. Once the decision was accepted, the entire camp seemed to mobilize quietly to prepare them for their arduous journey westward. It was done with the same practical generosity and lack of fanfare they had shown from the beginning, as if outfitting their own kin. They were given essential, practical gifts, pressed upon them with quiet smiles and gestures of goodwill, sturdy replacement clothing made of soft, durable buckskin, much warmer and tougher than their ragged quarry clothes, several pairs of spare moccasins skillfully sewn by bright willow, reinforced at the sole, warm, thick buffalo robes for bedding against the cold nights on the trail, watertight pouches skillfully crafted from bladder, filled generously with enough wazana and dried berries to sustain them for many days, even a small, sturdy cooking pot, scoured clean and fire-starting tools, flint, steel, and dried tinder wrapped securely. The women of the camp, led by Bright Willow, worked together quickly to create beautiful, intricately beaded belts for each of them, incorporating symbols like the dragonfly for resilience and seeing through illusion, and the turtle for long life and grounding, meant to offer protection and good fortune on their travels. Kicking Bear, practical and knowledgeable about the trails heading west towards the emigrant roads, helped them select a strong, gentle pack pony from the camp's herd, a sturdy mare with intelligent eyes, showing Anna how to properly balance and secure their bundled supplies onto its back, using traditional Lakota knots that wouldn't slip or rub the animal raw. Mary shyly gifted Bright Willow one of her best drawings, a rendering of the camp in the valley nestled by the creek, which Bright Willow accepted with a warm embrace and careful hands, tucking it away safely. Swift Eagle, along with the pragmatic Stone Hand who now seemed to regard them with grudging respect, perhaps seeing their determination as a form of strength he understood, and the wise Silent Walker, insisted on escorting them personally for the first few days of their journey. They guided them westward, leading them out of the familiar, sheltered territory of the Lakota winter camp onto the vast, intimidating, rolling expanse of the high plains, now greening with new spring grass, under a sky that seemed impossibly large, setting them firmly on a course towards the distant Platte River trails, major emigration routes where they would be more likely, eventually, to encounter larger settlements, wagon trains, or sympathetic travelers who might help them or carry their story further east. Those 3 precious days were filled with intensive, practical lessons crucial for survival in this challenging land, identifying reliable water sources in the arid landscape just by reading the terrain and vegetation. See how the grass is greener there. Water is close, Swift Eagle pointed out, navigating accurately by the sun during the day and the patterns of the stars, the Star Road or Milky Way at night, that one. He'd indicate Polaris, shows the north always, recognizing subtle signs of potential danger, from predators like wolves or cougars whose tracks they identified. Both animal and human scouting parties from rival tribes or suspicious white men, or sudden, violent weather changes brewing on the horizon smell the chi air, rain coming, and mastering the art of making a small, efficient, almost smokeless fire using dry buffalo dung that wouldn't attract unwanted attention from afar. Stone Hand even gruffly showed Anna a particular way to hobble the pony securely at night to prevent it from wandering too far, muttering something about keeping what's yours in this country. The final farewell, when it inevitably came at a place where 3 distinct, faint trails diverged under a vast, indifferent blue sky stretching to infinity, was deeply emotional, fraught with unspoken words and profound, overwhelming gratitude that felt impossible to adequately express. Bright Willow held both Anna and Mary close for a long time, tears streaming unchecked down her weathered face, whispering Lakota blessings for safety and strength into their hair. Dear Woman pressed another small, tightly bound pouch of potent healing herbs into Mary's hand, nodding encouragement and touching her heart. Gray Bear, who had ridden out with them for the first few miles, his presence a silent benediction, touched each of their foreheads in a final, solemn blessing before turning his pony slowly back towards the hidden valley, alone, dignified figure against the immense landscape. Swift Eagle clasped Anna's hand firmly, his grip conveying strength, belief, and a heavy sadness. Hokahi, he said, the traditional Lakota encouragement to press onward, to keep going, his voice strong, masking his own emotion. Walk strong, speak loud, do not let fear silence the truth you carry. He then turned to Mary and gave her a rare, gentle, encouraging smile that lit up his serious face. Use your healing gifts wisely, little sister who sees clearly. Help where you can. That is good medicine too. Then, the 3 Lakota warriors, Swift Eagle, Stone Hand, Silent Walker, turned their ponies without looking back, as was their way, and rode eastward towards their own people, their figures quickly becoming smaller, receding into the immense, rolling landscape until they blended with the distant hills and were gone, leaving only hoofprints in the soft earth as evidence they had ever been there. Anna and Mary were truly alone, 2 young women, barely more than girls, standing beside a single pack pony laden with their survival gear, facing the immense, seemingly endless, indifferent landscape of the American West. The sanctuary of the Lakota Valley, their place of healing and refuge, lay far behind them now, a cherished, unbelievable memory. Ahead stretched an unknown, daunting future, filled with profound uncertainty and undeniable peril. The shadow of Silas Croft and the traumatic memory of the Stone Serpent Quarry loomed large in their minds, a constant reminder of the cruelty they sought to expose and the power wielded by men like him. Later that same day, following the faint westward trail Swift Eagle had indicated, as the sun began its descent, they encountered 2 rough-looking, heavily armed trappers riding east. The men reined in their horses abruptly, their eyes lingering openly, avariciously, on the sister's sturdy pony and well-packed supplies. Well now, what have we here? The larger of the two men sneered, his eyes scanning them slowly from head to toe, taking in their Lakota-style buckskins. Two little birds flown far from the nest. Dressed kinda like Injuns, ain't ya? Anna stepped slightly in front of Mary, planting her feet, remembering Swift Eagle's lessons in quiet confidence and meeting hostility without flinching. "We're heading west to meet our kin," she stated, keeping her voice steady, betraying none of the fear coiling like ice in her stomach. The second trapper, leaner and with meaner eyes, spat a stream of tobacco juice near their feet, a deliberate act of disrespect. "West. Huh. Funny thing. Heard tell from some fellas back a ways. Heard Silas Croft over at that big rock pit. He runs lost himself a couple of runaway girls. Owed him a fair bit," they said. "Real property. Scrawny things. Dressed in rags. 'Cept maybe they got some new clothes now." He grinned unpleasantly, showing stained teeth, his eyes flicking meaningfully towards their buckskins. "Croft ain't the forgetting type. Puts a high price on his property. Offers rewards, even." Anna's blood ran cold, the mention of Croft and property a sickening blow, but she met his gaze levelly, her hand tightening into a fist at her side. "We don't know any Silas Croft. We're just travelers heading towards the Platte." The first trapper chuckled, a harsh grating sound. "Maybe so, maybe not, but a word to the wise. This ain't friendly country for folks traveling alone, especially those who might owe somebody something, or who look like they've been consorting with Reds. Best keep looking over your shoulder," with a final, lingering look at their pony and its burden. The men nudged their horses and rode on eastwards, leaving behind a palpable sense of menace and the sickening feeling of being watched, hunted. The encounter left Anna and Mary shaken. The reality of Croft's reach, his network of eyes and ears, even out here in the vast emptiness, starkly clear. Their vulnerability felt immense, chilling. But the paralyzing fear that had once gripped Anna's heart in the quarry was now transformed, tempered by her experiences and the Lakota resilience she had witnessed, forged into a focused, burning resolve. Croft was looking. He would try to silence them. He might even offer rewards. All the more reason to keep going, to reach someone who could amplify their voice before he found them. Mary, no longer frail and consumed by illness, carried herself with a new, quiet confidence born of survival, healing, and the discovery of her own inner strength and purpose. Her hand often straying to the medicine pouch at her belt, a tangible reminder of the strength and knowledge she now carried. They looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them, fear acknowledged, but determination reaffirmed. They were no longer merely victims, merely passive survivors. They were witnesses, changed irrevocably by their ordeal and their rescue. They were embarking on a difficult, dangerous mission fueled by profound gratitude and a fierce desire for justice, not just for themselves, but for the voiceless, and for the respect the earth itself deserved. We survived the quarry, survived the flight. Anna thought again, gazing resolutely westward into the setting sun that painted the vast sky with fierce streaks of orange and red. Because of them, because of the Sikangu Lakota, their intervention wasn't just rescue, it was revelation. Their kindness, their strength, their profound connection to the land, living with it, not just on it. It wasn't just a temporary sanctuary, it was a fundamental lesson in how to live, how to endure, how to remain human in the face of brutality. That deep respect, that fierce defense of what was sacred, water, land, spirit. Community, had saved them physically and spiritually. It was a truth utterly different from any she'd been taught before. Deeper, more resonant, more powerful than the dogma of conquest and exploitation that created men like Croft. It was the heart of the story they now carried, a heavy but vital burden. The trapper's implied threat only underscored the burning importance of telling that story, of bearing witness. Respect for life, for other cultures who understood balance, for the very ground beneath their feet. That was the counter-narrative to Silas Croft's greedy, destructive world. It was the fragile, precious hope they clung to as darkness began to fall across the plains, turning their faces resolutely west towards the distant, hazy horizon where the Platte River supposedly flowed. Anna took the pony's lead rope firmly in hand. Mary walked steadfastly beside her, scanning the ground ahead with newly trained eyes, checking the horizon. And together, two sisters bound by love and loss, strengthened by unlikely allies and profound lessons learned, they began their long, uncertain walk towards justice, leaving the Lakota sanctuary far behind, but carrying its enduring spirit forward into the heart of the fight.